All right, Doug, thank you for that. Mark Jones, political science professor at Rice University, joins us now. Welcome. Thanks for coming in. I know you've been busy walking us through everything that's been going through all this. So obviously Donald Trump poised to sweep the swing states. We're still waiting for a lot of that to come in. It was a surprise for a whole lot of people. Do you feel like these suburban votes made a big difference here? Because we were seeing a different story in the big cities in some of these swing states.
Well, suburban votes, but also the working class population, white, Latino in particular, but also black, swung heavily for Donald Trump. And he did, and really Kamala Harris didn't do as well among women as she had hoped, and Trump did amazingly well among men. Here in Texas, Trump won the Latino vote by 10% and the Latino male vote by close to 25%. In many ways, it could be sort of a realignment in that we're seeing white college-educated voters increasingly voting Democratic, but the rest of the population shifting more Republican. And it was in many ways a wave election in that one of the possibilities was always that the polls were a little wrong, but wrong all together, correlated. And that's really what we saw, where state after state, all were not really going to Harris by 1 or 2. They're going to by Trump by 2 or 3, but pretty consistently.
How did the gender gap come into play here? Because we hear often that women show up to the polls more than men. Poll-wise, it seemed like women were polling better for Harris than Trump. How did it all come into play?
Well, women represent more voters than men, around 52, 53%, 48, 47%. And they voted more for Harris than for Trump, but by a much smaller margin than men voted for Trump over Harris. So Trump's margin of victory in places like Texas and other states was 10, 15, 20 points among men, depending on the state, whereas Harris's advantage among women was 0, 2, 5, 7, and that wasn't enough to make up the difference. It was really younger male voters and male voters without a college education that helped push Trump over the top, and in states like Texas, Latino voters, which shifted pretty overwhelmingly to the former president and now president-elect.
Any word of what was going on with that, with the thought of why Latinos are going more toward Trump?
Well, the economy is a big issue. That is, at the end of the day, the Democratic messaging regarding the future of democracy and abortion rights did appeal to college-educated white voters and helped bring many of them over, but it did really nothing and did not resonate with Latino voters and working-class Latino voters who are far more focused on the economy and look at the past 4 years under Joe Biden and don't like what they see, especially compared to what they remember from the 4 years of President Trump's tenure.
The difference in messaging that we saw between the two campaigns, do you think that made a difference, especially when we're talking about these swing states where both campaigns, they campaigned heavily, especially if we're talking Michigan, Detroit specifically, and Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Harris campaign was messaging, but and many people were criticizing the Trump campaign because some of the things they were focusing on seemed a little esoteric. But at the end of the day, it seems that they knew what who their target population was. And what we saw was much more enthusiasm and turnout among Republican-leaning voters than Democratic-leaning voters. That was one of the things we experienced here in Harris County, where Democrats simply didn't show up at the polls. Likely, Democrats are going to pull out most of the key positions, not all of the judicial races, but the margin of the Democratic victory is tiny compared to what was being projected.
So it sounds like voter turnout made a big difference in this, too.
Very much so. African-American turnout, for instance, here in Texas was lower than normal.
Yeah. All right. Well, we always appreciate you. We know you've had a busy past 24 hours for sure. So thanks for coming in.
Thanks for taking time from Rice.
Thank you.